So, welcome back. We're holding in the 8th chapter on the original text on page Tzadik Ches. We're holding about, I would say, 10 lines from them, actually right before the brackets, the parentheses. For that matter, this whole idea, which I'll introduce in these very short lines, we took lots of time last week to try to explain this idea, how the Kutza Shel Yud, known in Kabbalah and Chassidus, L'mayla Misei Derishtal Shalus, where beyond the order of evolution, the way it is established by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, known again, Seder, the order of Ishtalshus. Ishtalshus means a chain again. We explain everything, the normal course of conduct of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in his world, and then there's the Lifnei Hashem Titoru, higher, that whole establishment established by HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself, and therefore he's in charge of that establishment. Therefore he could express himself many times, that he could establish a different type of relationship with the Yid, Klal Yisrael, the world in general, with a deeper level within himself, higher than the establishment that he himself established. Again, take the time, click away. Last week's class, wherever you're watching it, but of course, to acknowledge the host, as we periodically do in specifically the IsraelNationalNews.com. Ruth Shava English, thank you again. I want to just mention that together with that is the advantage of, again, you can see it, it's posted there also to go on the original website, which the advantage is, again, it's pretty clear on in the other as well, but as they have all the text laid out independently, but the advantage of the original website, that you have all the classes set up. The class comes up also with the separate scroll, as we mentioned time and again, and of course for newcomers, and then you have all the other previous classes set up on the left side of the original website. That's tanyaonline.com. tanyaonline.com, and you have there for that matter, not only give us a tshuva, we merited to conclude the other segments. We spoke about this in the past, because many times as we're learning, besides the general rule, in another place there, one part of Torah contributes constantly to any other part of Torah that you're learning in all areas of Torah. But in this case, you're talking about the Tanya, that when you're learning Yesod Tshuva, of course, there's so many areas, and there's L'kuti Amorim even, that contribute to the appreciation of this material, or the matters and the information we're learning in Yesod Tshuva by this present segment. As well, Shayich B'Emunah, we merit to conclude, which certainly everything in Tanya is definitely complements one each other. So you have all the previous classes lined up, and I say this, namely, this very last class that we spent all this time explaining this above-mentioned idea is very much elaborate. We took quite some time to try to comb through this whole entire idea. So let's try to get straight into it. And then when we have the Neisi of Mafesha V'Naki, coming from the Yud Gimel Midas Harachim, the 13 Midas, the 13 attributes of mercy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the inner dimension of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as explained last week. When we have that atonement from there, so then consequently there won't be any Yenika. Yenika literally means nursing, nourishment from. In this context as well, lachitzeinim, to the external forces, which are the forces of klip and setur achra, impure forces. He says the setur achra me'ashpa seitata canal, from the energy coming from the hey tata, the inferior hey of Hashem's holy name of Yud Kei Vav Kei. As we explained, when someone sins, he's taking the energy which is supposed to flow directly into his system, into his consciousness, as him being a chelik havaya ame, Yid has him within himself. The whole setup of Yud Kei Vav Kei is a chelik elakami mal mamash, part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And there's supposed to be that symmetry between the Yud Kei Vav Kei, the way it's on high, and the same Yud Kei Vav Kei within the Yid, the system of the Yid, which has an impact in his consciousness, in his thought, in speech, and action, and his attributes, and so on, the way it's illustrated in Perek Gimel. That's right, of L'kuti Amorim. Also, we have it in Perek Dalet in Igeres HaTshuva, the present segment. all a click away. You can see it with an easy target. Let's say easy access to those classes. Literally a click away to the target. No, an easy move of the move on the screen. With an easy move on the screen, you could just find the Perik Gimel in Likutei Amorim and Perik Daled in Higeres HaTshuva. Literally a click away to explain how when there is symmetry between the Shem Havaya on high to the Shem Havaya, the way it's in the Yid, same Shem Havaya, but the way it's in part becomes part of the system of the Yid as a Chelik Kamimal, as part of a nation which is Chelik Havaya. It all works in a very special manner. The expression of the Yid is just perfect in all levels, cognitively, emotionally, and of course the way it manifests in thought, speech, and action. Again, you can see there at the beginning of Peri Dalet as well of Likutei Amorim. So, Rahman, when a person sins, he takes the energy of the fire where it's supposed to come down, where it's supposed to make the difference within the Yid, which is the Hey Tata, the inferior Hey, the lower Hey of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and he removes the energy, and he brings it in, not just removes it, so it's not going to where it's meant to go, to the contrary. Klipas and Sitra Achra start nourishing and gaining so much force and so much energy, and consequently aggrandizing their enterprise, their source, their forces, and so on, their autonomy, which is the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted it not to be. In other words, Hashem loathes this whole idea that Klip and Sitra Achra, which he himself allowed to exist, but loathes them and loathes their enterprise and loathes their empire. And as such, when the Yid does it Aveir, he pulls the energy into Klip and Sitra Achra. Now, this is brief. We spoke about this in Hey, Vav, Zayin. All is clear. Again, click away, just in the Higeres HaTshuva. So if you're following, you understand what he said, that what happens is, when there's the realignment of tshuva, the hey to the yud kei vav, as he's going to say in the brackets, because you have the atonement from the yud gimel mitzarachim, you have the atonement of the 13 attributes coming from the core, kutzishal yud, the core of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, associated with the 13 attributes of mercy which Hashem divulged to Moshe Rabbeinu. We spoke about this, even the greatest sins, chata meraglim, chata egel. Hashem says there's something else, there's a resource, got to tap into that and you'll see it'll just work. And it did, because this is the way it's beyond the system that Hashem himself established. So when that happens, there's no more unika, there's no more nourishment to the chitzenu sitra achra, from the hashpa, from the flow of energy coming from hey tatov, the inferior hey, like we said before. And that's vazeh. And with this, it says in the bracket so eloquently, tashuv hey. Remember tshuva, tashuv hey. The whole point of tshuva is that the hay should return to the yud kei vav. Was that tashuv etato lim kaima, to its place, li yachid yud kei vav, to become one with the yud kei vav. B'day l'meid. Suffice to the understanding. Out of the parentheses. And he says that once you, again, a few of these ideas, even the last 2-3 lines we're learning, you have to appreciate it adequately. Understand what Dr. Rebbe says in the last few chapters, starting from Pei Dalet, Hey, Vav, Zayin, and now Ches. And the Dr. Rebbe continues, it has the immediate reflection down here by the Yid, by the godly soul, Sheba Adam within the Yid. Sins will no longer make the partition, divide between you and your Creator. Like it says, Hashem cleans up. He cleans up for those who do tshuva, and we say clean up. Why the terminology clean up? Answer, to clean and to cleanse their soul from the inappropriate garments, which are the impure forces, and sitra achra, which is the forces of klipa, the forces of impurity. These forces, which is forces of impurity, known as klipa and sitra achra, they're gone. The neshama is pure from those garments, and again, they're garments because the neshama is in its core, pure, of course, pure. It's a diamond which has become dirtied with different substances and mud and so on. Once you clean up, the diamond is shining. The Nefesh Elikis itself is a part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. By definition, will always remain and maintain its divinity, its sanctity, its sacredness. That's what the Nefesh Elikis is. It's a chelik el-kamim al-mamish. He says, "L'levushim atzayim." It's the outer, it's the garments, the unclean garments which Rahman Islam person placed upon himself. And pulled in Nefesh Elikis really is the Alter Rebbe in the end. Check out we mentioned this time and again, the end of the 24th chapter. The Rebbe becomes so descriptive of what transpires when a person sins. Levushim tzoyim, his garments become really dirty, and he's pulling the Nefesh Elikis. It's not only just person goes willingly, down into the mud because he has to get. This is really getting oneself dirty, compellingly, meaning to say it's forcefully against the Nefesh Elikis, which is in pain. Like the Alter Rebbe quotes in Megillah, Nefesh Elikis is in pain and crying. Don't bring me there. And you say the Nefesh Elikis is HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself. That's the mashal the Alter Rebbe gives, taking the head of the king and bringing it in. Yeah, look there, the lashon, into a place at Sayah decay and so on. Excrement, lashon there. The Alter Rebbe uses. You could look at it again and click away the last words of Perich Chav Daled, 24th chapter in Yigeres HaTshuva, and then in Likutei Amorim, that is, in the first segment. And that's why there's the dirty garments. But once a person does tshuva, it's reflective down here, not only on high, the hay is aligned with the yud kivav. It all happens simultaneous, and the person himself becomes a free bird. There's nothing blocking him. There's nothing constraining his neshama, which again, these garments of the person himself put on, dirtying his neshama. The garments become levushim tzoyim, dirty garments. And now when the person, the Eibishter, forgives, v'nake, not only forgives, but he cleans up. This lashon and is with precision. He cleans up for those who do tshuva, to clean up and to cleanse in their soul from these impure garments, which are the chitzanim, which are the negative and impure forces. And the Sitra Achra. Like it says in the Gemara, this is an interesting term. We experience, we mention, it's pretty much synonymous with the idea. We say Aveda Gereres Aveda. Someone does a sin, it causes another sin. Why does it cause another sin? Why should it cause another sin? You said once, and the answer is, when you're sinning, it's not that you got used to sinning, which is another factor also. One has to be careful, because when you do something once, twice, and time and again, you kind of get used to it. And if you're getting used to bad stuff, so that's no good, of course. But it's deeper than that. You're establishing, you're giving, or the terminology of Alter Rebbe here in Yigeres HaTshuva, you're aggrandizing the empire of the Klip and Sitra Achra. You're aggrandizing their space, their power, their autonomy. So you're the first one. You're the one who, like Alter Rebbe has in the end of Perek Vav, you're the one who established that. You're the one who gave them this greatness, or you contributed to their aggrandizement, so they're after you. You're going to get the front seat. We'll be after you. And Rahman after a Yid means that they're trying to make him sin again. And sometimes it becomes difficult, because there's something, if you had the glasses, you would see. There's this book we have for the kids. It's worth it to mention. What is it called? I think it's taken from the secular, similar type of book and idea, called Ellie and the Lie, that a kid takes some chocolate and someone, and he lies about it. And suddenly they feel a little edgy, and they lie again. And the more they do more, they feel more edgy, because there is this, so to say, this figure of like a monster type of figure, which is surrounding them and making them edgy and uncomfortable, and they can't go about themselves, and as such they can't get over the sensation of lying. They can't get over their own, even when they want to make the decision that they want to align themselves with the truth in the way the story is, they can't get over themselves because of this, because every time they lied, this monster, let's say, becomes bigger, becomes more intrusive, and attacks and surrounds, and he can't see that. He can't see it the way the book goes, but it's there, and he feels very confined, and that whole leaning towards lying the way he's done it in the past, he can't get over it until he makes a clear decision that I'm going to overcome this whole experience, or overcome this whole attack, so to say, by this negative force, and I'm going to say the truth. And he pushes through and he says the truth, and all of a sudden he feels light, and the images are like, I think like poof or something. You're like, it's gone, or it shrunk, and then he is able to go further and say and align himself more and more with the truth till it shrinks to nothing and it becomes nothing, and he feels like a free bird. This is like the book. So what am I saying? Storybooks about this, but I think it's worth it. It's worth it because say the Gemara says Malafa Fosse, the klip sitrach is sometimes a person feels that when you're good. When you're holy, you feel holy, and when you're not, you feel there's something, and you know that if you had the right lens, you would see it with your own eyes. There's something surrounding you and not allowing you to free yourself from the confines of the Nefesh Bahamis, which who is the one who gave them that overpowering energy to do this to you per se is, guess what? It's you yourself from the previous sin, because when a person sins, based on this whole doctrine over here, as he so clearly explained, that you increase, you complement, you increase the governing of the klipin sitrachra. They gain power, they gain strength in their autonomy. Again, it was orchestrated from above. That Hashem did give them autonomy, but the whole thing is that it should just challenge us that we should have freedom of choice. But in the contrary, we should not listen to them, to this force, and ultimately shrink it. And that's what's going to be. Mashiach's going to come. There's going to be a complete obliteration of the impurity which existed, began really their established autonomy following the Chet Eitzadas. Was the Yitzhahara before? Yeah, there had to be to persuade Adam to sin, but it was very distinct and different. It was evident. We spoke about this with the Tate itself, says how evident they didn't even know about anything which was things which were associated with impurity, or this which could have been associated with impurity, but they were completely oblivious to it because they were on a level. So the Yitzhahara crept in. It's the snake associated with the Yitzhahara, Nachash HaKadmaini, but once they sinned, Rahman al-Itzlan, that's when the minimal autonomy established itself to be an empire. And when Mashiach's going to come, that's all going to go. Hashem says, of course, through the Yid, namely through the Yid, all Mashiach's coming is through Ma'aseinu, the famous words of the Alter Rebbe in the beginning of Lamed Zayin, in Lukotei Amorim, through Ma'aseinu, it's our, it's not like Jack out of the box Mashiach. It's Ma'aseinu, our actions, our toil, our Avodah, of minimizing, ultimately shrinking the Kech of Sitra Achra, through one's holding himself back in thought, speech, and action. Chaz v'shalom, never to violate this which Hashem says not to do, not to speak, not to think, and so to increase in more goodness, godliness, divinity through doing the actual Hashem's mitzvahs. And with that, we take out the koyach, we shrink the autonomy of the klipa and sitra achra, and eventually to total obliteration and to total nothingness. That is the state of Mashiach. The truth will be evident. The truth will be apparent. As kolod as the entire matter. But when a person sins, he's doing that, and therefore they're inviting him, they're trying to lure him in to do more and more. And somewhat, when the person, if he had the right lenses, and a person could identify, he's feeling edgy from the klip and sitrachar. So like it can be a little frightening a little bit, but that's what it really is. That's the Gemara says malafa fosse. The klippa would surround him, liye madin, even when he comes on high. But the idea is not only talking about the person coming on high. The idea is that you could only imagine. It's worse than just someone maybe physically holding one back. This is real forces, and this is real strength, Rahman al-Itzlan, associated with klippa and sitrachar. They surround. Every time a person sins, because you're feeding them. You're the one who, therefore, you're the one who established that new space for their empire, new energy. You contribute to them. You give them energy, so they're after you. And they're after you, Rahman al-Itzlan. You feel confined. And you are confined one way. It doesn't mean that your freedom of choice is taken away, sometimes that could happen also. As the Alter Rebbe writes, explains, the Farshim explain, for example, like Abipare, Hashem pulled away his freedom of choice because he did he expressed such evil beyond the measure of this which was mandated to him from on high to be Pari Melech Mitzrayim, to have Am Yisrael under his tutelage and bondage and so on, just to make sure that we are going to appreciate the Yetzias Mitzrayim, or whatever Hashem's plan, to understand that there's a concept Hashem wanted to teach the world, and Am Yisrael there's a concept of Mitzrayim, and we're able to alleviate ourselves from Mitzrayim. But Pare did much more than that. He tortured, he tormented the lives of men, women, and children in things which were unthinkable. So he gained such a thick layer that he himself put on himself. He wasn't able to make right choices. You read in the title, like, what's this? And Moshe goes away. He says, no, he starts again. Like, he forgot what happened yesterday. He forgot that you had already 6 makas and Moshe's going to strike you again. It's just you don't see straight. Pari didn't see straight. His freedom of choice, kihiksha Hashem, it was taken away from him based on his own actions. And so too, Rahman al comes to the Yid. The Alter Rebbe himself says you can look on Perik Yud Zayin in Likutei Amorim. It says Yef Shel Haschil. There's a certain thing when you're locked in somewhere and you try to be that Eved Hashem Chassid and so on. You got to do something for it. It's not discouraging. It's encouraging. Like someone say, you can't come to the party. You have dirty clothes. Oh, you exclude me from the party. You're being mean to me? No, I'm being nice to you. You have to go change before you're coming to this party. It'll be an embarrassment for yourself, for the people around. I'm nice to you, therefore I'm telling you, don't come to the party with those dirty clothes. Hashem says, when Alter Rebbe writes, you can't start serving a Kodesh Baruch Hu. You can't come onto the conveyor belt of Avodas Hashem because of your past, and you've established thick walls between you and your Creator. So imagine that I try to talk to you and there's a thick steel wall. You're not ignoring me, you just don't hear me. And that's what Rahman al establishes. When a person sins, he's establishing these layers and layers and these layers. If they're accumulative, they establish themselves as a thick wall. Mechitza shel barzel, Alter Rebbe says you got to take down that wall before you want to come onto the conveyor belt of Avodas Hashem. You got to clean up. So it's a good thing. It's not chas v'shalom. You should never take the Perik Yud Zayin wrong. To the contrary, Alter Rebbe is encouraging us. Let's get onto the conveyor belt of Avodas Hashem. And because if someone doesn't, there's mlafa fasik. There's a certain, and again, we can identify the person. Mitzvah geireres, mitzvah, when you do a good deed, you learn Torah, you had a good day of davening, you're enthused to do this, to repeat the same thing. And as you do it again and again, you're more motivated, you're more passionate about it, you're more enthusiastic about it. And then you're excited about it. And Rahman al works the other way around. One's complacent here, complacent there, and allows Rahman al his speech, action, thought, eyes, vision, audio to fall through the cracks. So based on what Alter Rebbe is explaining over here, you're establishing more and more. You're expanding the empire of Klip and Sitracha, and they're attacking primarily you. However, when one does tshuva, and based of everything with Alter Rebbe, Achrei Amokas Hadas, like Alter Rebbe begins, the 8th chapter, after profoundly investing your mind in everything what I told you. Therefore, Yuchlavakish B'mix Munka Deliva, like the Alter Rebbe begins this chapter, you can ask from the depth of your heart, now that I got it, please, the original, the increasing mercy, please erase my sin. And when Hashem acquiesced to that, and He opens up that new channel of Yud Gimel Midas Harachmim, which is associated with the core of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, beyond the establishment of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, where there the sin has blemished and fragmented. That's where there the fragmentation in the Yud Kibavki, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu goes deeper, the Kutzah Shel Yud. Yud Gimel Midas Harachmim, and Alter Rebbe said, when that happens, there's no more unique L'Sitrachar, there's a cutoff, a complete cutoff from Klip and Sitrachar. They're no more nourishing from you any energy. Yeah, they're shrinking. Yeah, they are. Is it a good thing? Of course. Let them. Of course, it's a good. This is what the problem is. Their existence is their problem, and we're trying to get completely shrinked into nothing. Interesting. Alter Rebbe himself has in the end of Tes Chav Tes and Likutei Amorim that's in the end they want in themselves. Yitzhahar himself wants us not to listen to them. So, but they're doing their job. Does it bother them when they're shrinking? Yeah, somewhat. But in the overall, the cosmic picture, they're part of the plan, and the plan is that they should shrink ultimately to nothing. So of course they one way or another appreciate it. Again, famous Zayar. You can see it in the end of the 9th and 29th chapter. Gives a mashal, brings a famous mashal of Zayar. But what happens? So what happens over here? They're no more. They're no more nourishing. The heitata is alleviated. Goes back to line itself with Yud Kivav, because they pull the energy of the heitata. They're kind of dominant over the heitata, the inferior hay. But when there's no more Yanika, they don't nourish anymore. So the heitata is alleviated and is able to arise and align itself back with the Yud Kivav. Tshuva, Tashuv, Hey, the Hey is returning back to the Yud Kivav. No more Yanika. And so too it's reflective. This is the point. Down here, Lamata. There's no more sins which separate you and between your Creator. V'nake. Menake Hashem. Hashem cleans up for those who do tshuva, to clean and cleanse their soul from the impure garments, which this is the chitzayim sitracher. Mishkas Mafafasi completely gets rid of them. The idea of the book, when the kid is able to go over themselves, all of a sudden he realizes, yeah, there was something which was causing me limiting me to express myself, to be able to make the right choices. When they pulled through, all of a sudden it became easier and easier. That monster shrinks and shrinks to nothing. And the kid takes a deep breath. That's what transpires, nothing. That malafafasi, that energy which surrounds the neshama and limits the neshama, gone. Givaldik, free bird. We could think about anything more unique, more special, and more exciting than that. No, we can't. And therefore, once you're a free bird, because the Spirit of HaKadosh Baruch Hu encompasses you, surrounds you, passes you, and cleans the neshama up. So the nefesh of the yid, just like the hay associated with the holy name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is able to return to the Yud Kivav, so too the Yid, which is right now cleansing and clean, and as such free and alleviated from the constraints of the Nefesh Bahamis, of the Yitzhar, of the evil forces, if you will. Nefesh Bahamis is also, it's a klipas nega, from the evil forces which was caused through actual sin, right? Nefesh Bahamis, not to go into the whole explanation, is meant to be can be used as a conduit to the Yid's Avodas Hashem, with both your hearts. It's a harsh to start loving, because when we're talking about a person did not do that, what he was meant to do. The Yid did not do which they're meant to do. And Nechmanosam falls into sin. The Yid falls into sin, into action, speech, and thought. Nechmanosam then establishes this whole intimidation of the Klip and Sitrachra, and completely surrounding the Neshama. But when he does tshuva, so then he's completely clean. He or she are completely clean, cleansing, and therefore at that point, just like the hay aligns itself with Yud Kivav, it's reflective, and it's again the counterpart of the hay, which is the neshama down here. It could ultimately turn to HaKadosh Baruch Hu mamash, v'lalas mala maila, and ascend higher and yet higher than to its source of the dafka by Yisbarach, to cleave and to adhere to HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'yichud nifla, in awesome oneness, become completely one with Hashem. To what degree? The Rebbe adds something over here which is stupendous. To what degree Yid could become one with Hashem? In continuation, or in the spirit of these of the message over here. In the same way the neshama was one with HaKadosh Baruch Hu before Hashem blew the neshama into the Adam, into the Yid down here. Vayipach ba'apav nishmas chayim. So to understand this perfectly, you have to see the Perek Beis and the Likutei Amorim, and here from the Perek Dalet here and the Gersa Tshuva, all the click away. The idea that the difference of Vayipach ba'apav and Bidvar Hashem Shemem, as everything else was from Hashem was created through speech. Speech we mentioned, should we say it again, or you can remember from then? I don't feel like wasting time, but let's try to do it again. Let's try to do it very brief. Speech, a person can talk for a long time. Why so? It's also the breath is coming from within. That's the way, that is the formation of speech, is the breathing, and of course the ability to the ability to form words and so on. But it's all the breath which is coming from the person. Yet we can talk for a long time because it's coming from more of an external place from the person. It's not the nefesh. It's not the expression of the core of the nefesh itself. When a person blows, it's coming from the core of the person. So you can't blow for a long time. You can talk for an hour, hours, but you can't blow more than for a few seconds, especially when you blow a balloon. Well, once, twice, and then a break you have to take. But that's again because of the pressure of the balloon. But just try to continue blowing. You got to stop. Why? Because that's your nefesh is talking, is expressing itself. It's coming miteiche from your inner self. The pnimius is meitzi min v'chas v'ikach lashon al lashon al tereb. So while everything else in creation comes from dibur, from speech, and therefore everything is associated with chitzenius, the externality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the yid, and precisely by the precisely by the yid, the Hashem says vayipach ba'av. We asked it, it's pasuk says by other Marishim, but we explained it. The whole other Marishim was there for eventually Bezer Eishis. The whole world was created. The 6 days of creation, including Adam, was creation. Bezer Eishis, B'shvil Yisrael, for the sake of Torah and the sake of the yid. So again, we spoke about this in the past, but let's try to focus on it. So by Yipach, it says by the Yid Hashem blew into his nostrils and Nishmas Chaim. It was very different in this thing than everything else in creation, including Malachim, created from Dvar Hashem Shemaim Nasu. Uvaruach Piv Kol Tzavo. And this is all coming from even Malachim. The Alter Rebbe says Malachim also come from Shem Elikim, associated with the external, vis-a-vis the Shem Havaya. And everything is created from there. So we spoke so much about it. Someone said, "Oh, what do I need a Torah to connect to Hashem? I'll sit on the table. I'll eat lunch, and what the lunch is not doesn't have it has independent energy. The table has an independent energy. Let me be around the table. I'm around myself for that matter. I'm also a creation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What do I need to connect to Hashem through the Torah? Because the Torah is Hashem Lekecha. Torah is the energy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What, the table's not the energy? Well, it has an independent energy. Of course, it's not a question to begin with. Because everything comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's the externality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You mentioned the professor comes to say an essay. The same professor comes in and says, "Could you hang up my coat?" If you want to identify the professor and you want to repeat what he says, you don't repeat it. Hang up. This is stuff nothing to do with who he is as a professor, as an intellectual, as a scholarly individual. This, he said, is coming from the same mouth and the same expressions. Hang up my coat before he starts his essay, but it's not where you start if you want to repeat what he says or give any dignity to that. You say, but we're talking about just to understand it. Coming from the same person, but that's not what he's all about. This is the same idea. Everything comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but that comes from Sar Mamor, is the inferior expression of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Lashon of Isaiah, this is Milin Dedyeta, cheap word, this is the inferior words. Where is the Eibishter? The Eibishter is in Torah. Aseres HaDibris, that's the core of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's the Kaviyachol in the Nimshal. That's where the scholarship, the intellect of the professor is conveyed again when he comes to say to have a presentation, an essay, which many people come to hear him, his scholarship. As an intellectual. That's him. That's what he represents, not other stuff, what he says. And if he says, pass the sugar, pass the salt, if he's eating a sandwich, that's not him. It's not the real him. That's not what he represents. HaKadosh Baruch Hu's core is Torah. You want to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you connect it to Torah. Like if you would repeat, and you want to identify with the words of this professor, you start from where he started in his presentation, not could you hang up my coat? Where could I put my boots? This is the difference of Torah. This is the difference of Torah, for that matter, and everything else of creation. And so to the neshama, everything comes from the external dimension of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Even Malachim says they come from Shem Elokim. The Rebbe brought a pasuk. Perik Dalit, here's the Tshuva, click away. And then there's the Yid, which is Vayipach, it comes from the core. Similar to Tanya for that matter. Tanya is also Anoichi Hashem Malikecha. Lashon of Zayda Leis, Ramos Leibishim, because of the core of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's not hinted even a name, a letter, an expression of a letter. It's the core, it's the Anoichi. So too, the Vayipach Ba'apav Nishmas Chaim, Hashem blew from his core, which becomes the Neshama. Therefore, the Yid is a Chelik of Vaya Ame. Part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, part of the Havaya, the phenomenon, dynamics of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Not Shem Elikim. Havaya is the inner workings of Hashem. Hashem, of course, there's even higher than Hashem. We spoke about it. Lifnei Hashem Havaya. There's the Lifnei Hashem. There's the Lifnei Hashem as well. But generally, Hashem, in comparison to Hashem Elikim, that's the core of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's where the Neshama comes from. By Yipach Ba'apav Nishmas Chaim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu blew in because he put part of himself into the Yid. And again, synonymous with Eidachid is a chelik of the Kami Mal Mamor. But once he blew it in, then it's up to the Yid to make sure that there is that symmetry and alignment between his neshama and the way it's on high. Rachman and Slan, if he's pagan, if he blemishes neshama, you have a whole process. Again, there's not just blemishing neshama, you're taking the energy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself, B'reish Shel Melech, the head of the king, and bringing it in a place which is so impure and so low and so abhorred and high, and therefore it's always dependent in the conduct of a Yid. But when a Yid is tshuva, he's able to, similar to the Hey aligning itself with the Yud Kivav, it reflects on the person himself, that even he himself becomes, he or she becomes that free bird, so to say, that there's nothing blocking them. There's no malafa fosse phenomenon over here anymore. There's no layers. It's all pure. It's all clean. Menakihu lashav, me cleaned up for those who do tshuva. So then the person is able to return to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I become one with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. To what degree? Something so incredible that you're able to become one with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, similar not only to the first moments when Hashem blew the neshama into you, which together with the fact that it's coming from the core of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and it always identifies the pnimis of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but nonetheless, it was kaviyachol separated. Just like when you breathe, you blow, as much as that breath is coming from the core of the blower, it would have been separated. You could still identify it with the blower one way or another because it's coming from the core of the blower, figuratively, at least to identify this figuratively, because it's coming from the core. You are saying it's not just like the external breath which is coming through talking, you're saying it's coming from the core, but nonetheless is left one way or another. To maintain the connection with it, in the nimshal over here, in the message, it's up to the Yid. But nonetheless, it's left. It's separated kaviyachol of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, one way or another. Does it always identify with the pnim? Yes. Says that I'm always connected with the pnim of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But nonetheless, that Vayipach Hashem blew the neshama to you. There was a moment before it blew the neshama to you. And then there's a moment after he blew the neshama to you. You were born, he blew, he infused the neshama, imbued the neshama into you. There was the moment before you, he did that. But what was the neshama like before he did that? Was it just something, I blew, I'm going to put it on the shelf, when the baby is born, put it into that baby, into that Yid, to the newborn Yid? No, it's not on a shelf. It's part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's kind of unidentifiable at that moment because it is really part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, similar to when you think about your blowing. As much as the breath which comes from your blowing is so much tied together and part of your core, but you can't compare the way you have already blown or to the way that oxygen, that breath itself is part of you prior to your blowing, and then it's not identified even as a breath, as something which could be described or identified because it's part of your nefesh, it's part of who you are. That is part of the core, and deeper, meaning to say it can't even be identified. It's not identified because it doesn't exist. The breath that you blew a moment later, it doesn't exist in the moment. It's just there that it can. You have the ability to blow, but it's not like it's in their shell, so to say, somewhere, and you're going to take it and then bring it out to this where you want to blow for anything you want to move through your breath. No, it's part of your nefesh. It's not identified as a breath then. And so to another Kodesh Baruch Hu, when Hashem blows the neshama into the Yid, the moment before it blows neshama, that's really part of the phenomenon of HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself. It's not even identified as a vayipach. It's not identified as a breath coming from the core of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's beyond that. It is the core of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the Alter Rebbe says, once you're free to reunite with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you can go higher and higher, mila to the source, and to cleave in HaKadosh Baruch Hu with such an awesome oneness. To what degree? The way you, neshama, were part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, before Hashem even blew that neshama into you, to come down into a guf, then you were completely one, as Alter Rebbe right away says, he says, this mashal we just said over here about the manifech, like someone blows before you actually blow. It's not that like a certain breath is actually stored away. It's part of your nefesh. It's part of your soul. It's part of who you are, and it's really unidentified in a good way because it's part of your nefesh. It's not a separate entity. And of course, that was the neshama prior Hashem blowing, imbuing the neshama into the Yid. But when the Yid does tshuva, to what degree could he or she reunite himself with HaKadosh Baruch Hu? To such a degree that they become mamish part of the nefesh of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Kaviyach. Even b'terem shnafar, before Hashem expressed that vayipach ba'apei, there's vayipach ba'apei. Which then the neshama was part and parcel of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to that degree, the one who does tshuva and is clean and as such free and as such can ascend, soar on high. To what degree? Again, on high it's not in space, but in their avodas Hashem, to become so one and so intimately one with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Cleave and adhere with HaKadosh Baruch Hu to the extent that you become kaviyach part of the Eibishter's nefesh, part of the core of HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself, in a way, beterem, even before the Ruach Piv, which on its own is also close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu because it's coming from the Vayipach, it's not Dibur. But nonetheless, it's a mitzvah, it's something, it's beyond that. Mamash part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's nefesh. Zui Shuvah Shleima, this is complete Shuvah. As we look forward, continuing, and hopefully by next week we'll be able to finish the chapter and to see how it's tied with his beautiful spirit. Definitely such a beautiful place to conclude today's class and look forward to next week's class. Say to have that Shuvah Shleima, that oneness, that degree of oneness, to become mamish part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself. And what Alter Rebbe is going to explain how, B'ez Hashem, we look forward, it's coming, how does it express in the Yid's Avodas Hashem? It's not just this kind of a moment of ecstasy. There's a constant service, which is again an upgraded service within the Yid's Avodas Hashem, which reflects that oneness, that unity. As we look forward, as Hashem, as we say this coming week, have a wonderful week, a wonderful night.